Oh, we're live. Hi, y'all. Hello, Substack. I'm still getting used to the interface here. I had a Facebook, well, I still have a Facebook group that I went live in for like every week for 10 years or something. I had to figure out the tech there. If you know me, I always had issues with the tech, so I'm still getting used to this. But I am so happy to be here with y'all. I'm loving being on Substack, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Hi, Brandy. Hi, Rachel. Hi. Oh, I don't know if I'm pronouncing. I see G. Let's see. I actually see that I can see some of your names. I'm going to get started right away. If you have questions while I'm chatting, throw them in the chat. I will do my best to read those. I want this to be beneficial for you. I am very much an open book. I don't have anything to sell you outside of, I have a free masterclass coming up next Wednesday, which I will give you details for at the end of our class, Webinar Sales minus the ick. We're not talking about webinars today, but it's completely free. It won't be hosted on Substack. So we'll share that with you. So this is all meant to be value, all meant to help you to figure out what's working with content, marketing, sales, launching, and why just get visible and just post more content. With all the love in the world for people who are giving that advice is very unhelpful advice and what we want to focus on instead. Gotta love the wonky tech. Yes. Yes. I go by G. Thanks. I'm so thrilled to be here. So thrilled to have you all. So let me know as well if we're going through this. Yeah, again, if you have questions or just if anything isn't clear, because I want to make sure this all lands for you. So I wanted to bring this today because I'm just coming off of, I feel like we have seasons in business where for those of you who know me, I realize I'm new on Substack. I'm a high level 101 business coach. So I only work with clients one-on-one. I've been in business for 10 years. I help my clients scale to six and seven figures in a very sustainable way in various niches and industries. They're all service-based entrepreneurs. And my first client scaled to $1 million my first year in business. So my clients get big results, and I'm seeing, because I only do one-on-one, I see a lot of what is going on in the industry across different strategies, models, yes, industries, but I have more of a feel of what's kind of actually working and not working, as well as what's going on in my own business. And I think what I've really seen is, we all know the industry has changed over the last couple of years. We have a trust recession. What used to work isn't working the same way. I've seen a lot of stress just around, like, is content working? Is visibility working? How do I bring in sales? I've heard a lot of noise around, our course is still selling, our course is dead, our webinar is dead, our launch is dead. And so I keep wanting to be a voice that I do not think that is true at all. I do think things have changed. And when things change, that's what happens in business, right? We have to adapt. We have to see what's going on. And so I have seen how what's working in marketing has changed. It's different than it was before. Some people might say it's harder. I don't love to say that because I think that creates a fucked up story in our head. I think it's just different. And, some things are easier, some things are harder. And with that, I'm coming off a season of, I've had quite a few clients in launches and very successful launches. So let me give you the evidence. Courses are still selling, launches are not dead, but I've seen what has led to sales be a little different than I did a couple of years ago. So that's what I wanted to bring here today. I will never say there's one thing that makes a strategy work. That is BS. But there is one piece that I'm seeing as a common thread between, I just had a client sell a course launch, so courses are not dead, have matched her record-breaking course launch, and she had a 57K cash month. I had another client have a first-time group program launch in a very different industry. She had 7 spots in a group program. We sold it out actually early and had to close the doors to that early. And then I have another client who has more of a one-on-one done for you offer, launched a new offer. She made 39K sales in 30 days. And then my own business, I'll just share how this shows up in that. So what I've seen across those is there's one common thread that I'm really seeing that I think is just playing a bigger role. And I think because of the changes we've seen online and how much noise there is around going viral and AI, I think this is actually something I'm going to share this and it will be so basic. You'll all be like, I kind of know this, Kim, but I want to explain why many of us think we're doing this and we're missing it, and how to apply that to different models. Okay, just seeing here. Wayne, hi, nice to have you. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Alex. Hi, y'all. Oh, it's so I can almost see you. It's so fun to be here with y'all. So let me pull up. I actually made myself some notes. I will probably go rogue, but this will keep me from going down too many rabbit holes. So let's just talk first and foremost why talking about just getting visible and just posting more content isn't beneficial. Of course, we want to get visible. Of course, content, that's what I'm doing here, is helpful. I think when we just hear that, it is missing a lot of the nuance in terms of what makes a strategy work. I actually really love Gary Vee's work, but he talks a lot about like being omnipresent, just post more content, just post more content. And if we just post more content, it's sort of like the definition of insanity. especially if we're doing it in a way that doesn't have a strategy behind it, we'll just create a lot of work for ourselves. And we have, I've been there in the past in my business where it is like we are doing so much work for very little in return. Similar with visibility, I think the challenge with visibility is visibility on its own does not create enough depth and relationship to create a sale. If we I use this example all of the time, but it's just worth naming. I'm sure we've all heard the example of the influencer who had, I think it was 2 million followers and couldn't sell 37 $20 t-shirts. She had visibility. She had tons of content and she couldn't make a sale. And so I think what happens in the online space, especially when we're stressed about bringing in sales and we're looking at what's working, there's a lot of talk about that we kind of silo parts of a marketing strategy and customer journey. And the parts that are the flashiest or the loudest get the most attention, like visibility and content, at the expense of what actually creates sales. And I think the other thing that happens is we often unintentionally will look to people who visibly seem like they're very successful because they're influencers, they have really big audiences, they're influencers. But if we're not trying to build an influencer business, and I'm assuming if you're here, you're probably more likely a service-based business or a smaller business. You're not an influencer is a business, but that is a very different business model. We are trying to use a strategy that will support an influencer and maybe getting a brand deal, but not support creating a sale in a small business, low or high ticket sale, right? There's something different that is required to create a sale than is required to get a follower and to get a brand deal because you have so many followers. Does that difference make sense for us? Um, G says, I'm usually energized, but gosh, your energy is amazing and so glad to meet you today again. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I love what I do, and my client work is my favorite, but this is my second favorite thing, is getting to hang live with you all and share these things. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Brianna. Brandy. Hey, G, so glad to make it on here. Isn't she awesome? Oh, you guys, thank you. I love you. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. Okay, so I think that's where we get a little trapped, right? And so we end up looking at, again, visibility and just posting content can absolutely get you followers. It can get you audience growth, but audience growth on its own is not the same as a customer journey that creates a sale. Those are two different things. And a lot of what's being taught online, especially when we're like, oh, nothing's working, things have changed online, it's very easy for us to get caught up in, okay, I'm seeing what's worked for this influencer. Okay, I need to study hooks. I'm not saying hooks aren't important, but we get really myopic into one part of a customer journey or one part, and it's usually focused on just visibility or just post more content, right? I just need to get more visible, because if I just got more visible and I had a bigger audience, if I had 100,000 people in front of me, I would make more sales. But again, we saw somebody with 2 million people couldn't make a sale on 20 t-shirts or 37 t-shirts or whatever that was, because those are two different goals. Those are two different things in our strategy. And so again, what can happen then is we can get very focused on, I just need to post more content. So I'm just going to work on, most of us here on Substack, so maybe y'all hate Instagram, but I'm also on Instagram. And I know I see this for clients a lot. They can get really focused on, like, I just need to figure out how to go viral, or I just need to figure out how to post more content in the feed. If we're on Substack, it's really easy for us to think, I just need to figure out how to get more subscribers or more followers. And it's not that that isn't a piece of the puzzle, but again, that is simply visibility content. That is not what creates a client and a sale. It's one part of all of that. I've shared this before, but I've gone viral on Instagram for my account. I've had multiple posts that have had 500 views, 90,000 views. And I don't think that has ever created a client for me. It's not that that is wrong or bad. It brought me hundreds, maybe thousands of followers. I'm not mad at that. There's an aspect and a benefit to that in terms of, I do think there's some social proof in terms of having a large audience, things like that. But what has actually created clients for me is very different. And when I look, coming back to what's working, what I'm seeing working in marketing launches right now, to my clients who sold out their group program, who had that course launch that did really well, who made the 39K sales in 30 days. Yes, we're focusing on visibility and content, but there's a much bigger piece, and there's a much bigger piece that I'm seeing with the launches. So what I'm seeing, okay, let me actually give you this context, and then I know I'm teasing this out a lot, but I feel like this is all important nuance, so we understand why what I'm going to share that's so basic is important, because we're ignoring it. I think the other thing that's important to remember, I looked this up on Google, so I don't know if this is the exact stat, but we know in general that clients need 7 cumulative hours with our brand before they're ready to invest in a high ticket offer. I'm talking about a high ticket offer because I think many of you are service providers who have high ticket offers. I also, again, have clients with low ticket offers. So that number might be smaller for a low ticket offer. But if we sell a high ticket offer, so between $1,000 and $10,000, let's say, in general, people need 7 cumulative hours with you. So 7 hours. And if most of us are focusing on get more visible, post more content, and that's in the form of 3-second reels, quick bite-sized messages in our notes on Substack, that is 8,400 3-second reels or 2,800 days of posting 3 times a day, not even 1 time a day, or roughly 7.7 years to create enough of that time and depth and touch point with somebody to turn them into a high ticket client. So if we are focusing on visibility and just post content alone, and I know some of our content is more in depth and more nuanced, but just from where I think a lot of us get trapped and kind of lost in the sauce, when like, I just need to get more visible, I need to get more people in my audience, 7.7 years. And again, this is not exact math or exact data, but I think it helps us to see, well, of course that shit's not working. If we're so focused on I need to have the right hook, I need to go viral, and it would take me that long if I don't have the rest of what my strategy needs to create a sale, if I'm just focused on visibility. G says, yes, Brandy, agreed. And hi, friend, psyched for your webinar shortly too. Loads of girl power vibes today. Oh, Brandy, let people know if you have feel free to put in the chat here. I do not mind at all. If you want to tell people if you have a webinar, feel free to put that in the chat for people. That makes my heart very happy. So we can see 7.7 years with just visibility alone. And that's because when we are looking at what creates a sale, what I always think about it is all about starting and then building and then leveraging strategic relationships. And visibility alone is not the same as relationship building. Visibility is what gets you seen, and accessibility and depth is what builds enough familiarity, which builds the trust, which helps somebody to understand why to buy from you. I think the number one mistake we see always, but particularly right now with how much has changed online with kind of the AI slop and like this just push for like go viral visibility, is trying to build relationships and sales through reach alone, through visibility and reach alone, without giving people more access and depth. Like the example I always think of, that's like if we wanted to get married and we were just like hoping swiping on Tinder and being visible there would get us married, or going on one date with somebody and then never asking for a second date, or playing hard to get, or barely texting back with somebody, or never showing up in person, right? And just hoping that if we were just visible enough and like that would be enough to create a strong enough relationship to get married. We can all see that. I don't know, maybe there's some people who like swipe right on Tinder and get married, but that has not been the case for me, at least. And so with all of that in mind, I think that's always been true in business. What I've really seen, especially in the launch strategy world, is yes, some of these things have always worked to a degree, but the big difference I'm seeing is what used to be a very linear customer journey and a very linear sales funnel, right? The old school funnel where you hear like there's a big funnel, wide at the top, it kind of narrows down at the bottom, and we see who leaks out, and we kind of have the top of the funnel content, and then we kind of bring people down through the funnel. I think many of us who've been in business for a second have heard of that. It's not that isn't a thing, but I think what has really shifted is we have moved to an ecosystem approach, and an ecosystem that requires not just depth, but varying depth of touch points. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. And when I'll go through some of my client examples, but again, just so that, because I feel like these are like kind of hokey words. And so hopefully let me know if you need me to explain anything. But again, I think in the past, the reason we just talked about visibility and content is we very much came from this like funnel approach, wide at the top, narrow at the bottom. That is still a thing. I'm not like saying that isn't a thing. However, what I really see is how much it has turned more into an ecosystem. And so if we just look at building a funnel, we will leave so much money on the table. If I pulled up the definition of an ecosystem just to help this make sense, this is very sciencey and nerdy, but an ecosystem is a geographic area where plants, animals, microorganisms, and other living organisms interact with each other and their non-living environment as a functional interconnected unit. The system involves complex dynamics, relationships, energy and flow, nutrient cycling. The big piece here is an ecosystem is a functional interconnected unit. And so when I'm looking at, we'll use one client for an example, the client who sold out her first time group program. Her her numbers do not make sense in terms of her funnel numbers. She should have sold like one spot and she sold out early. The reason for that is she has really focused on building a marketing ecosystem instead of one funnel. In the past, what we got taught is just get visible, just post more content. I'm going to teach you next week about webinar sales and how to use webinars to the format we use to create sales without the ick. But we were taught just get visible, get people to a webinar, have a sales pitch. That's a launch. Or visibility, content, we have some sort of conversion event, and then we sell at the end. I probably taught that in the past. What I'm seeing now is overall, most of us don't consume content that way. User behavior has changed. We are consuming things in such different ways. And if we don't have an ecosystem, we are losing people because somebody will see you when you get visible, sign up for your webinar and not show up. But if you have an ecosystem because you're also posting content on, let's just say you're on Instagram, and you have very in-depth touch points there, I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, then that can support the sale. If you have them show up for your webinar, but they don't open their emails because who opens emails anymore? And so they miss all of your sales emails. And that's you have a linear funnel. You're missing out on so many of those sales and so many of, right? We've gone past the visibility and the touch points there. But if you have an ecosystem where you're retargeting them with ads, or they're seeing you on social media, or you're in their DMs, or you have a podcast, or you're going live, right? If you have an ecosystem with those varying depths of touch points, you can capture more sales. And what I saw for every single launch recently, and the client who made 39, it was 39K in 30 days. She had a more done for you offer. But what we saw there, even some of that was a referral based offer, but because somebody who was referred to her, because she had an ecosystem of content where somebody could come in and binge a bunch of things, that created a sale that probably would have been lost otherwise. She had somebody book a call with her who referenced posts of hers from months before because they had binged, they had just kind of gone down the rabbit hole. And so this is what happens to me a lot. I will have somebody, this makes it sound like, oh my gosh, I have some crazy strategy. Someone will find me and be ready to hire me within a week, even though I have a high ticket offer. But that's because that 7 years that we were just talking about in terms of the 3-second touch points, I have varying depth of touch points and I have an ecosystem. So somebody can find me on Substack through a live and go binge 218 podcasts, or somebody can find me on Instagram through a 3-second reel and come watch my bite-sized biz lessons and stories, or then hop over to Substack and read a 2,600 word essay. So not to say you have to have the same content, but there is a way for people to jump around in that ecosystem and everything supports one another. Let me know if this is making sense or if you have questions. The big thing here, and what I want to kind of land the plane on, is while I think it's helpful to see we have an ecosystem, I think this can make us think we need to be omnipresent and we need to be everywhere and we need to do all of the things. And that is not what I'm saying. I think if we just think about being omnipresent and being everywhere, we go back to just be visible, just post more content. What I think we want to think about instead is going back to how do we build relationships in real life? And then if we think about our whole job as business owners is to build relationships, but to do so in a very strategic and leveraged way that leads someone to a sale. So if we go outside of online space for a second and we think about how do I build relationships with somebody, I do that by first I do have to get visible, right? I need to start a relationship and then I need to nurture the relationship. And I'm going to nurture that relationship not with one type of touch point. I am not, my best friend lives in Texas. We've known each other for like 20 years. We met in LA when I was still acting. And she's not still my best friend 20 years or 25, I don't even know how many years later. She's not still my best friend so many years later because we have one form of touch point. One of the things we do is we send each other memes, funny memes on Instagram. If that is all we did, like that's fun, but I don't think that would sustain a friendship, right? We need to have varying touch points. I send her some funny memes one day. Another day, I'll text her something that popped up that made me think of her. Once a week, we have a scheduled call where we catch up. Sometimes that scheduled call is us talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes it's about something that's going on for us. One of us are really deep, right? We have these different touch points that all have varying depth. I'm going to Texas for an event next month. And I'm going to see her and her kids in person, right? Like that's going to be a real in-depth touch point. And so we have these varying depths of touch point. And again, going back to what I was talking about earlier I think what happens is we kind of gotten lost in the sauce online. When things stop working or things change, because the industry has changed, I find we kind of fall into one or two camps where we're either on the like, just get visible, just get viral, the very, I don't even want to say it's shallow, but just the quick touch point, the more, I don't want to say surface level, but it is a little bit more surface level touch point. Or my Substackers are probably like this. This is where I have to be careful that I don't fall into. We go into only the depth side of things, right? Only depth touch points. The 2,600 word Substack, or the 45-minute live stream and webinar, or the in-depth conversation. And I think what's important for us to see is, if we're thinking about an ecosystem, it's not just being on different platforms and being omnipresent. You can be on, for most of my clients, recommend picking one platform, maybe two, and going deep with that. It's varying touch points on the same platform, right? You don't need to be everywhere. I think that just gets us into the mere exposure effect. If you haven't heard that, that's a principle that was coined, I don't know, a gazillion years ago. And it's just the idea that the more you're in someone's face, the more you build a relationship. And that is true. The more you're in someone's face, the more you build a relationship. But the way Instagram, Substack, the way algorithms work is, if we're not having very in-depth points and actually built, like, we're not going to even get visible. And the way sales work is what I was talking about earlier, is it's not only building a relationship, it needs to be a strategic leveraged relationship that is bringing someone towards a sale, right? Can we see how that's a little bit different? There are still relationships, but the relationship I have with my bestie, I'm trying to sell her on my friendship, I guess, but we would be talking about and doing different things if I was trying to lead her to a sale to work with me. Hopefully that difference makes sense. I'm just going to see the questions here, and then I'll pick up my thought. Wait, no questions. Great. So what we tend to do is we swing from, like, we tend to do one or the other, and we really need both in our ecosystem. And that is what creates an ecosystem that, yes, allows you to get visible to start a relationship, but also gives you not just enough touch points, because we do need that mere exposure. We do need look, there is something to that repetition that builds a relationship. But if we're also going to strategically lead that relationship towards a sale, then we need to build in depth along with those more surface level touch points. And what I mean by that is, if we think about because I think even just get visible, what does that even mean? Just get visible, just post more content. If I think about the shorter touch points, what I'm thinking there is, how can I use those that is going to be something different from my depth content, to share things with people that do build a relationship. I think sometimes we just get stuck in share more value, share more value, share more value. And we forget that part of the value that creates a relationship that leads to a sale is also let people get to know us, build a relationship with us. Let people know our values, let people know our personality. And then using our depth content, right? So instead of just post more content, right, we want to mix of both, using those touch points to maybe bring in more value, to create more problem awareness, to do more that's going to facilitate somebody moving towards a sale, and seeing how those integrate together. Because again, the way I think about it, and we'll talk about this more in webinar Sales Minus the Ick next week, the way I think about it is, all of you, I'm so glad to have you all here live. My hunch, and hi, Julie, I see a couple other people here. Hi, Tammy. Most of you did not show up to hang out. We've been here 23 minutes. I'm guessing you didn't show up here to hang out with me for 23 minutes, and we'll probably be here for another 10, 15, unless I can make this concise. And just because you just saw this post, like this pop up on Substack, or because I posted this on Facebook, you probably joined me live because you've had a surface level, a smaller touch point, a less depth touch point, right? You've had other touch points in my ecosystem first with me that built enough of a relationship to say, okay, hopefully this chick isn't totally batshit and she has something of value to share and she knows what she's talking about. It might be worth showing up live and giving some of my time, right? That's our energy exchange here. I'm giving you value, you're giving me your time, right? We needed to have those other touch points even to get you to be here and to hang out with me, right? That's how the relationship works. If I think about my bestie, I'm carving out time in Texas. I'm spending extra money to go see her. For that to happen, we had to have enough touch points before that really big depth one for me to be like, yes, I'm going to spend my time and my money for this human being who, I mean, obviously love her, but that had to happen through a bunch of those other touch points. And that's how we create an ecosystem, as opposed to, again, tending to do one or the other, where I'm just going to try to go viral. There's nothing wrong with going viral, but that tends to be, I'm just going viral to create reach, to get visible, to maybe grow an audience. If we only do that, we don't create enough depth in the relationship to take someone from swiping right on Tinder or that first date to create a long relationship with your bestie, where you would fly halfway. I live in New York City, so halfway across the country, right, to spend time with them. And if we just focus on depth and we don't have that other ecosystem, then we can pour however long it takes us to write our long, thoughtful Substack. I know those take me a second. I pour a lot into them. I pour a lot of thought into these lives. My webinar next week, please come join me for webinar Sales Minus the Ick. I'll put it here, but I've poured a lot of thought into that, right? Like that is a lot there. We can pour all of this time and be like, I'm just creating more content and I'm creating more value. But if we don't have the different varying touch points that are a little bit lighter, nobody knows why they should come read our long ass Substack or join us for 45 minutes or come to our webinar. Is this connecting the dots? I feel like this is so basic, and I feel like sometimes when things change in business or when we're not getting the results we want, basic and simple seems too simple and seems too easy. And so we want to look for the more complicated thing, or we think it has to be harder. We almost like gaslight ourselves that it could be that simple. Or again, we tend to pendulum swing and we just choose one side. I'm always like, it's both and, but we choose one side and we tend to pick the thing that either we feel like we're the weakest at, we feel like other marketing online yells at us we need the most. And I think right now, marketing is yelling the most that we need to go visible, we need to go viral, buy my hooks, buy my strategy to grow your audience by 10,000 people. And it's missing the depth. I think on Substack, maybe we're starting to pick up on that, but it's very siloed on one part and the starting of a relationship and not what is required to not only build and nurture a relationship, but a strategic one that leads it to a sale. And having that ecosystem where then if we're taking this and applying this to a launch, we're not getting stuck in old school linear funnel on its own. Yes, a funnel is important. Yes, when I'm with my clients, we look at their funnel and we look at where we're having leaks and we look at their emails and all of that. But understanding things have changed, people have changed, the way we consume content has changed. It is not the pandemic anymore where we are all stuck on our computers and stuck at home where we're like, just give me all of the things. We are bored. We're past that. We want to be offline. We are bricking our phones. So we are not consuming everything that's put in our face. I think our attention spans are down. I think we are burnt out. Again, we are just consuming differently. So if we're just looking at that linear funnel, sign up for a conversion event emails, and we're not looking at the ecosystem around it with those varying touch points, where are we sending emails outside of this launch? Where are we showing up on social media outside of this launch? We're missing so many sales. I would say this is not an accurate stat. I'm just thinking through those launches. I think the client who made the 39K sales in 30 days, and I'm just these are just results in the last month because I think it's helpful to see what's going on right now versus what was working years ago. I'm pretty sure. So those were referrals. I think she had a really strong referral. I'm sure she would have made some of those sales. I'm pretty sure some of those sales would not have moved forward though, because those referrals came from social media and it was her ecosystem that even helped the referral to book a call with her to reach out in the first place, that ecosystem of varying touch points. And I think it was that ecosystem that had a couple of the people she had consults with go from, I think I might want to work with you, to tipping them over the fence because there were a couple specific pieces of content they reference. If I think about both of those launches, I don't know if it's half, but I think the group program, I think it was at least half would not have happened without that ecosystem. I don't think she would have had webinar because she doesn't use ads. So I don't think she would have had any webinar signups, but I think at least half the sales were brought over the edge because of the ecosystem, not just the linear funnel. And for the course sales, that one's trickier because she has a very vast ecosystem. So it's hard to say how much of that was, but I would say it's over half of those sales were a result of, yes, having we went slide by slide on both of those clients' webinars. I went slide by slide with them and worked on their webinars with them. And I combed through their sales page and we went through every single sales email. So it is not to say that linear funnel was not important, but I think so much of what even got people to sign up, pay attention, and then to tip people over the edge to make those purchases and to buy. And even when we were looking at things like where people were getting stuck on the checkout, the cart page, and looking at what objections we needed to speak to in content, most of that was due to ecosystem, not the linear funnel. But that linear funnel is a part of the ecosystem, right? It all works together. It's just when we silo these things, that's again when we miss sales. And that's when we just get caught into, I don't know how to bring in a client. I don't know how to bring in a sale. I don't know how to make this launch work. I just need to look at this one. We get very, very myopic, right? I just need to get more visible. I just need to post more content. And that without thinking about these varying touch points and how this works as an ecosystem together, I think is where we work really, really, really hard and we do so much. And we're like, well, that must mean my business doesn't work. That must mean this offer sucks. That must mean I suck because I'm not making sales, when that is not the case at all. It's just we're working too hard on almost the wrong things instead of seeing it in this way. Hey, Bree, anybody have any questions? Let me know if this is landing for you. If you have any questions, I feel like I had one other thought I was going to share with you on this. I'm just checking my notes because I tend to go quite, I make notes for y'all and then I go rogue. I'll use myself as an example, and then I think, and then I'll tell you about my masterclass next week. The other, just because I don't have a launch model business. I haven't only one-on-one practice. I've only done one-on-one for, tested other offers, but for a decade now. So I think just so you can see, I just talked about a group program. I talked about core sales. I talked about done for you. So just to use myself as an example, then all one-on-one model, I see the same thing for me. I very much see how having an ecosystem takes and collapses my customer journey. I would say in the past, my customer journey was probably on average between 3 to 6 months up to a year, meaning the time from which somebody came into my world to when they were ready to work with me. And I want to be so mindful here because I think overall customer journeys have gotten longer for most businesses just because of all of the changes we're seeing and because of the trust that's gone down in our space. But I think there are varying things going on there. And with what we're talking about with the ecosystem, with what we're talking here about thinking about those varying touch points, the other thought I want to land the plane on here and why I think this is so important is, yes, customer journeys might have gone longer. And I don't think the goal is how do we shorten our customer journey. However, for however long your customer journey is, there are also people who come into your world who are ready now because they have a need to have problem and you have a need to have solution, ideally. And we need to make that clear to them. And when we don't have an ecosystem and we don't have a way for people to build that depth with us very quickly, we lose those people who come into our world who are ready right now. So using myself as an example, I would say like that's probably an average customer journey. And what I've seen over the last, I'd say year or so, while other businesses' customer journeys are getting longer, the majority of people who have hired me in the last year have come into my world and hired me within, I'd say, I mean, it depends when I have an availability, obviously, but because I don't always have availability, but from within a week of coming into my world, they've booked a consult and been ready to hire me. And then sometimes we have to start later with start dates. Up to, I'd say, maybe a month to 3 months. And now I think there's various reasons for this, but I think part of that is because I have consciously focused on building more of an ecosystem that has those varying touch points and focus intentionally on making sure I don't just have I have them as well, the more surface level touch points, the short touch points, but building in more depth. And there is depth for people to binge. Those 7 hours we talked about that somebody needs with a brand to buy a high ticket offer, somebody can come into my world and sign up for a webinar, right? You can sign up for my webinar next week. You can join this live stream. And if you're like, oh, I need a high level coach, like I would love somebody who will like sit with me on a call and go slide by slide through my webinar and go over every sales email with me and help me figure out what's going on with my mindset and help me figure out what's working out with my launch and help me go over every hook and figure these pieces out together. I want a 57K cash month too, right? Like if that's you, you can, instead of hearing this one live stream, you can go binge all of my podcasts. You can go binge, I don't know, it's like 300 live streams. You can go read all of my Substacks. There's enough there in that ecosystem for the customer journey to get collapsed. And so this is not to say you all need to like have a gazillion pieces of content, but this is just to connect the dots on why we want both and how when we start to build out an ecosystem instead of only having a linear funnel, right? Like I think it's all like the passive income people just talk about only having that linear funnel. You can like set it and forget it. If we think about that and we think about it through starting relationships, how do we start a relationship? How do we nurture a relationship? And how do we build that customer journey strategically in that relationship so that the right people understand why we're the person to work with them. When we do that because we have a need to have solution to somebody's need to have problem, we can collapse customer journeys. Again, I don't think that's the goal, but just so you can see how that really works and how that can work in a one-on-one model as well. Okay, y'all. I feel like that makes sense. I don't want to I want this to be basic. I want this to be simple, but just in summary, courses are not dead. Launches are not dead. Group programs are not dead. One-on-one is not dead. Low ticket is not dead. High ticket is not dead. Everything is still selling. I, again, only work with clients one-on-one, so I get to see this across industries, across niches. Yes, we have a trust recession. I honestly think we're coming out the other side of the trust recession. I think that has weeded a lot of people out. So it's not that that doesn't still exist, but I want to be a voice for, I think we're further away from that. Yes, things have changed in the online space. What worked before, you could just get visible and post a lot of content in the past. So you just basically needed a pulse and you could book a client in the past. That has changed. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't even think things have to be harder. They just look different than they did in the past. They mimic more of what works with brick and mortar. They mimic more of what works with how we build relationships offline, which if you're here, you are probably a relationship great for you. And we just, again, want to think, instead of only having a linear funnel, it's not that a linear funnel and thinking through it that way isn't helpful. But if we only think about that, or we only think about how do I post more content or how do I get more visible, we tend to solve the wrong problem. And instead thinking of this as how do I build an ecosystem with varying touch points, with varying depth, so that I'm starting relationships and nurturing those relationships, but also letting that ecosystem support that linear funnel so that when somebody comes into my world in one way, right, where we're not expecting one thing to do all the heavy lifting, especially in a time where people are consuming content so differently. And most of us don't consume things in a linear fashion. Most of us are ignoring so many things. So we need to give both people a reason to show up to consume our content, but we want to kind of catch them in different places. And I can't make promises, but I've really seen how that makes such a big difference in making sales, but also in continuing to be businesses that thrive in this very AI driven kind of funky world. So I hope that is helpful for you. If you want to learn more about how to build varying touch points, one of the depth touch points that I use in my business and that many, not all of my clients, I do not believe in one size fits all formulas, but many of my clients do use webinars. Webinars are so not dead. They are still, I would say there's every single client that I mentioned results today and my own all use webinars. So webinars, I think if we're looking at those varying depths of touch points, a webinar, okay, I did the math on this as well. It would take, hold on, let me tell you this. It would take 900 3-second reels to equal one 45-minute webinar. So just in terms of just get more visible, just post more content, one webinar does what 900 3-second reels would do, or like 3-second Substack notes. So I think webinars are an excellent tool for building depth very quickly, right? Collapsing the customer journey. And not only can you start a strategic relationship, but to really build the depth required for the trust that is required to lead somebody to a sale, right? If we're thinking about that time somebody needs with their brand. So I also think webinars have a horrible rap because old school webinar teaching was gross. It was just about, I don't know, like bait and switch. How do you like sell at people the whole time? Had no value. Or I think then pendulum swung and most of us were taught to like fire hose people with information, which I don't think is valuable or converts into clients either. So next week I'm teaching Webinar Sales Minus the Ick. I will walk you through the framework my clients and I use to have webinars convert into sales right now without the ick. I have taught 63 webinars to date. So just to give you some evidence, and made 2.1 million. Webinars have helped me to grow an audience across platforms. I think we're at 32, 35K, something like that. It has helped me to continue to make 40K cash months. I make 40 to 50K cash months with a one-on-one model alone. It has helped my clients to the results I just talked about, but also to make results far bigger than I do. I have clients making up to $1 million per year. Webinars are not the only thing, but they are a big part of that. So I will walk you through that. I will also walk you through. So I've been running webinars for a decade in my business, about 2.5 years. At about the 57 webinar mark, I noticed how much things were changing online. So I actually changed my approach to webinars. So I'm going to walk you through the exact shifts I made so that webinars are working today and still bringing in those sales. And I hope to have you. So I will drop a link in the, how do we do this? After this is live, this gets posted on Substack, I will pop a link in the comments and you can grab that there. Or if you're on Instagram, my link will be there for me as well. And then if you have any questions, drop them on the replay because I'm going to hop off after this. I just see a couple other names here. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for hanging this whole time. Thank you for giving me your time. I do not take it for granted. I value you so much. I appreciate you. And I hope to see you next week for Webinar Sales Minus the Ick. Bye, y'all.